So recently, Fender announced a new line of guitars, and they've slowly been trickling out into the world, and they've caused kind of a big uproar amongst the guitar community. And I just wanted to share some thoughts on it, because unlike a lot of the people spewing their opinions online, I actually went to my local music store and I tried one of the new Fender Standard series Telecasters. I played this wonderful guitar, and I just wanted to share my opinions and why I kind of think the internet is wrong about this guitar. I do have a couple complaints about it, but I just wanted to share an unbiased opinion. Just so you all know, I love Fender. I love Fender guitars. I own a couple. I have bought all of them with my own money. I am not affiliated with the brand in any way. I've always paid my own money for them. And I just wanted to talk about what I think a lot of people are getting wrong in the hype about this thing. So this is not paid for. I wish I could have bought that guitar and given you guys a real kind of playthrough demo. But unfortunately, my almost 10,000 subscriber strong YouTube channel is not necessarily big enough that I can justify purchasing what is a moderately expensive guitar just for the sake of a review. But anyways, let's talk about the new Fender Standard line and why I think the internet's wrong about this guitar. So there's been a lot of hype going around online where they've been calling this Fender by Squier, which I think is kind of hilarious. I won't lie. It's a really funny, good, quippy tagline. But the thing that I noticed, that I first noticed when I picked up the guitar, that instantly kind of distinguishes it from the Squiers, is the finish that's on it. To me, again, Squiers are amazing guitars. For many years, actually, one of the famous blue guitar, if you've been on this channel for a while, my blue Strat, is a parts caster made from the core of that guitar for most of its life was actually a Squier Affinity Strat body from like 2010 that I bought for $185 when I was like probably 11, 12. So Squiers are great. I'm not knocking Squiers, but the thing that I instantly noticed picking up and feeling the neck is that it felt very similar to this Player Telecaster. This is not a Player 2 Telecaster. This is part of the original line. And picking it up, the neck profile seemed similar, but the thing that I really loved about it was the finish on the back of the neck and the body. The Squier finishes versus the Fender finishes, like I would say, like even the Mexicans, and of course through to the Americans. The Squiers have a very, very sticky lacquer, which if you can get around, that's fine. I personally am not a fan of the super thick lacquer. I think it's really kind of gummy. And so when I was playing the guitar, that was one of the first things that I noticed, is that the neck felt almost identical to this Player, which is awesome, right? It's good that there's something kind of more affordable that feels good and has the Fender headstock on it. And more about the price on that guitar later. But again, the fit and finish was way better than anything I've ever felt on a Squier. Classic vibes, all of those. The fit and finish is head and shoulders, I would say, above what you would get from a comparable Squier priced guitar. Now, the next thing that I noticed picking it up, and this is going to be a little bit of a fragmented point, because some people, I've seen them complaining, first of all, that the body is poplar, and then second of all, that the body is 4 pieces. Now, what I will say is I am not the world's biggest fan of the fact that the sunburst finish is a 4-piece body and it doesn't have a top veneer. I honestly think Fender, when rolling that out, should have had that model with any kind of transparent finish. I think it would have been better if they did a veneer on top, and maybe that, for those of you who don't know, veneer, a very thin slice of wood, just so that it looks cosmetically a little bit better. And I would have loved to see that happen, and then the sunburst finishes, I don't know, like $10, $15 more. Because, again, if it's a transparent finish, that kind of sucks to see a bunch of fragmented little pieces through it. And the other thing that people were complaining about, again, is that it's poplar rather than, alder, ash, kind of these traditional telly things. But I actually was pleasantly surprised when I picked up the Fender because, again, as one of my jobs before I was just a full-time musician, I worked in a music store, and I've unboxed literally hundreds of Fenders and Squiers. And the classic vibes were all, again, fantastic guitars, but they all weigh like 9 to 11 pounds. I think the heaviest one I unboxed was a 50s Telecaster, and it literally weighed 12 and a half pounds. And that's kind of the added bonus of poplar, I would say, is that it's a significantly lighter wood. It is a cheaper wood, which is why it's probably used on those guitars. But again, kind of leaning into the fit and finish of it felt better. The weight of the guitar was significantly better than I have personally ever experienced from a classic vibe Squier or something like that. And this, I think, is maybe like the biggest case for the Fender Standard series, is that it is lighter and feels like a Fender rather than a Squier. Whereas the Squier, you could argue there are Squiers that are maybe spec'd nicer than this Standard series guitar. But overall, as like a guitar that I would be drawn to and want to play all the time, I think that the Fender Standard, I would take that over a Squier pretty much any day. The other last thing that I'll kind of add about the four-piece body is people are, shockingly to me at least, upset about this, whereas Fender has always been kind of the no frills, no nonsense. Like Leo Fender was very pragmatic in his design of all of these guitars. So most Telecasters and Strats are actually 3 pieces. Some you might get lucky and find a 2-piece, but like for example, this beautiful player Tele that I love has 3. There's a seam here. I don't know if it's showing up on camera, and there's a seam here. And if you really look at the top, you can see some variation in the wood and the color and whatever. But again, very, very subtle in this. It's a solid color. If it was a sunburst, it would be much more apparent, and I would be less stoked on it. But 4 pieces is not necessarily anything new or anything crazy to be upset about. Now, one of the other hot button topics of this standard, or of the Standard Telecaster, again, this is a original series player Telecaster, but the Standard comes with ceramic pickups. And this, again, is getting a lot of hate. And I personally, as well, actually do prefer Alnico pickups over the ceramic pickups. I hope if Fender redoes this line, if this line sticks around, that they will maybe put Alnicos in it. But the thing that a lot of people are missing about ceramics is that they aren't necessarily worse pickups. There's nothing inherently worse about a ceramic pickup. It's just maybe not everyone's cup of tea. And for example, I was using, on my blue Strat, I had ceramic pickups in it, just the stock Squier ones. And the way that you can almost mimic an Alnico effect by lowering them a bunch, because ceramic pickups tend to be hotter and have maybe a little bit more harsh of a sound. But by running them lower than most people would, I was able to still preserve some of the Alnico-y kind of Strat tones. So ceramic pickups are not necessarily the be-all, end-all. They aren't these horrible, cheap things. They aren't these crazy, expensive things. And again, they're put in because they are maybe a cost-saving measure, and I think Fender could really do themselves some favors by putting Alnicos in, because that tends to be the favorite pickup in the guitar world. But yeah, going through the pickups, I mean, would I have preferred it if it had the same pickups as the Player Series in it? Probably, but I played it for about 10 minutes through a Princeton Reverb, and again, I wish I could have given you some actual demos, but I wasn't about to haul all of my stuff to a music store to try a guitar that I wasn't going to buy for the sake of this YouTube video. Again, I wish my channel was big enough where I could just go screw it and buy this guitar. But the pickups going through the Princeton Reverb, I mean, I wasn't super aware of the problems. I did have to dial my amp settings on it a little bit different than I usually would when dealing with an amp like that. But honestly, they're perfectly fine pickups. They sound like a Tele. It does its job. So that's kind of my thoughts on those. And then the most kind of confusing complaint to me is that people were getting upset about the fact that this guitar is made in Indonesia, and they're saying that it cheapens the Fender brand. And I think in 2025, that's a little bit of a ridiculous take, because when you look at the state of guitars, like American-made guitars don't really matter anymore. They are going to be more expensive because U.S. workers earn higher wages, but the fact of the matter is that pretty much all guitars these days are made with predominantly CNC machines, and then humans to oversee the kind of like final finishing and all of that stuff. And that's not to say that the stuff that's coming out of the American Fender factory isn't better than what's coming out of the Indonesian factory, but in terms of like what you get, you can produce the same guitar these days in America, in Brazil, in Kenya, in Indonesia, in China, wherever it is. And so Indonesia, the way that they're doing that is they're just trying to kind of find a way to offer as good of a playing experience as possible while keeping the cost as low as possible. And now, speaking of the cost, the other common complaint that I see about this is that people think that it's overpriced. And I frankly would agree with that. I ran the numbers in because when I first saw everyone getting mad about this, I was like, do people not realize that this is a reissue basically of the old Mexican Standard series that I remember drooling over when I was younger, in my teens, 14, 15. I remember in 2014 I almost bought a Mexican Standard Telecaster, but then I ended up getting into my jazz band and I spent the money on an Ibanez Art Core instead. But I remember distinctly that guitar being 599 Canadian dollars. And I ran that through an inflation calculator, and that $599 price that I would have paid in today's money would have been just under $800. And so this current line I think is $849.99 Canadian. Not quite sure what that converts to in US. I probably should have looked that up before I hit record, but for the money, it's a little bit more expensive than you would like it to be. I would like to see it maybe closer to the $700, $650 kind of price range, but again, it is what it is. And people keep saying, well, you can get better guitars from other companies, you can get higher spec guitars from other Asian-made companies, and that is so totally correct. Don't get me wrong. The stuff that, like, for example, Squier is doing right now is absolutely incredible. There's this company that I've been seeing pop up on YouTube, Jet. I've never got my hands on them, but they look and sound pretty great. So if you're looking for a cheap kind of Telecaster thing, you can 100% go for it. But the key is it doesn't say Fender on the headstock. And I know that everyone online likes to say, well, oh, it's da-da-da-da-da-da, like you can get just as good as the guitar, but would you really care about what's on the headstock? All of that. And we do. We just do. If you say that you don't, you're kind of kidding yourself, I think, because you could see anything. Like, the brand identity of it is part of the thing. It's not a Fender Telecaster if you get the Sire. And again, the Sire has a roasted maple neck. It's technically maybe better specs and all of that kind of stuff, but it doesn't say Fender on the headstock and it doesn't say Telecaster. And we all, I think, deep down inside, do kind of care about that. Like, let's be real. If money was no object, we would all have Fender and Gibson custom shops. We just would. Because they're amazing, they're in that kind of line. Again, maybe you're a modern metal guy who likes these crazy shreddy things, but the Fender name on the headstock does mean something, and the fact that Fender is offering this in a little bit more approachable of a price point is going to get a lot of people, whether you like it or not. Could they technically get a Sire for potentially cheaper and save that money? Yes, but the Fender name does carry weight. It's kind of like, I think about this a lot with cars, right? Like if you think about aspirational cars, like you want a Ferrari or you want a whatever. Is a Ferrari for the everyday person actually worth like 20 times the cost of a Honda Civic? No, because you still have to drive the speed limit or relatively within it. And all of these things. You buy it because it's this thing. And I think Fender is justified in being that thing. And again, after playing this guitar, do I think it's a little bit overpriced? Yes, but if I was, 16, 17 again, I didn't have a bunch of nice guitars, and I was looking to kind of step up from, like, I don't know, a Squier Affinity or whatever that it had for a really long time. I think this makes sense, because if you buy this guitar, the biggest thing that I would say, again, to put the Fender by Squier kind of thing out of the way and done with, is the only thing that I'm not stoked about on that guitar was the pickups, and it seems like there's been some inconsistency with the switch. That's actually something that I didn't mention. The one that I played seemed to have the heavy Fender switch rather than the PCB style that some of the early reviewers have seen. So maybe that's a change that's actually going to stick. I don't know whether it's just an inconsistency, but the one that I played had a good switch. And the thing that I would say in defense of these guitars is you have to kind of pick what you want to do. If you want to get a guitar that feels great, is lightweight, feels like a Fender, and you're maybe going to have to drop some money in pickups in a year or two if you want to change those out, I think that this guitar makes a ton of sense. If you think it's a little bit too pricey and you're happy with a Squier, by all means, buy the Squier Classic 5. I personally I don't mind the Squier necks. I think the shapes and profiles are always a little bit thinner than I would like them to be, and I don't like the finish on them. But if you're happy with the Squier, get the Squier. And if you're one of those guys who's too cool to care that your guitar says Fender, and again, hats off to you if that is you, but you don't need, like I don't get why everyone's super upset about this. Because again, I've played this guitar. It's a great guitar. Can you get more bang for the buck if you go a little bit cheaper? Yes, but it doesn't say Fender on the headstock. It doesn't feel like a true Fender, because it's not a true Fender if you don't get a Fender. And again, you can get higher specs. You can get roasted maple necks. You can do all of these things. But again, the reason that those guitars are cheaper is because they aren't Fenders. They aren't the thing that has been throughout the history of the last 75, 80 years, whatever it is. Fender has been probably the most important guitar company. It's definitely the best selling and probably the most significant in contribution in amps and guitars and all of these things. And again, does that make the guitar a little bit overpriced for what you get? Potentially, because it depends on how much you care about all of those things. But I just wanted to make this video because I've heard everyone talking about this guitar and I was dying to actually try one. So again, I'm not affiliated with Fender in any way. I do love Fender guitars. But this is my real honest opinion after playing one of the guitars and trying it out. I would feel comfortable taking that guitar on a gig and playing it if, like, my house burned down and I had to quickly replace some of the stuff that I have. I would have no qualms about buying that guitar and then maybe changing out the neck pickup kind of thing. They feel great. They're lightweight. I think they are better than Squiers. But again, when you bring in the price variability, everybody has to make their own decision. But anyways, those are just my thoughts. So if you enjoyed this video, I'd encourage you to check out some of my other stuff. I usually don't rant about gear. I usually teach lessons in kind of a more practical way. But if you're looking to take a guitar lesson with me, there's a link to that down in the description. If you want to support me and what I'm up to here, you can subscribe to my Patreon, which is also linked down to the linked down in the description. I also have some ebooks and courses for sale on my website, linked down in the description, and I upload at least 2 new videos every single week. So I hope I'll see you in the next one. And yeah, let me know what you think about this whole Squier by Fender, the new Standard Series catastrophe. I think it's all overblown, and a lot of people are irrationally angry about it. But thanks for listening to me ramble about this, and I wish you a wonderful day and hope you have some fun playing the guitar.